morning. My name is Briar Mielis.
And I'm Carla Justice.
And we're here today with Mike Lindstrom, who is an author and he's an expert in human behavior. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little about your program?
Yeah, so I got started in this business. Actually, I'm a lawyer by education, but I got into the business working for famed author and speaker Tony Robbins in 1998 and helped build his coaching program. And it was all based in the psychology of human behavior and persuasion and why people do what they do. So I helped build his organization for a couple of years, started my own program. My company is actually called One Question LLC. And I've been doing that for the last 15 years, doing corporate coaching and also speaking.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. That must have been a lot of fun working with Tony Robbins.
Yeah, he's a tough guy to work for. You know, he's one of those kind of guys. We're going to talk about that today, about excuses. You know, he's a no excuse kind of guy when it comes to accountability. So it really taught me a lot, for sure. Helped me build my business.
So, let's just jump right in here. I mean, can you share with me how you see accountability affecting corporate America?
Yeah. So, you hear the word a lot, especially in corporate America. There's this cliche that everyone's got to be accountable to each other. But the reality is a lot of companies don't have strategies to create accountability. So we talk about it, but yet we don't give action to it. That's kind of where a guy like me comes in. I come into an organization or a sales team or an executive team, and I teach specific strategies. For example, one thing that we talk about is creating ongoing rituals within a company or a team. So you have checkpoints. It's one thing to, get everybody all motivated or fired up on a goal or strategy for a period of time, but you don't have any follow-up. So I would say in corporate America, people will respect what you inspect. So I help people create those inspection points, rituals within an organization to hold the accountability really strong.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So as far as you were talking about like life experiences that, affect belief systems, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I call it the success equation. Some of the naysayers call it the failure equation because it actually is true for both sides. When you fail at something and when you succeed at something, this equation comes into play. I just like to think of it more on the positive side. When you create a life experience, that's just something that happens to you every day. For example, you go work out at the gym, or you gave a great sales presentation. That's a life experience. When you do enough life experiences, you start to create a belief about that particular activity. And the more life experiences you have, the stronger the belief becomes. So when you have a really strong belief about something, you obviously have a behavior that starts to follow it. So I think about, like, for example, in corporate America, we go back to inspection points. If you have a CEO of a company who's created inspection points, let's say a Monday meeting at 9 o'clock where everybody has to report their results and be accountable. Those are inspection points, but every meeting acts as a life experience. So after about 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of meetings, the belief system of the team starts to shift. And then you start to see their behavior start to change. Thus, at the end, you start to get different results from that particular team or individual.
Wow, that's pretty neat. One thing is, can you tell me about, you said that those were weekly sales meetings. Now, if an individual wants to change their belief system in order to serve their corporation better, should those things be weekly rituals, or do you believe that daily rituals are more important?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in daily rituals. Much like in our lives, we do so many things subconsciously that we don't even think about, like wake up, brush our teeth, take a shower, drive the same way to work every day, right? So we do things already very ritualistically that we're not even aware of. But when you want to change a behavior in your life relative to your own, leadership style, or it could be your body image, or it could be how you contribute to the team, it's got to be a daily checkpoint. One thing I call is a conscious timeout, CTO. When you call conscious timeouts on yourself on a daily basis, it's just a function of asking yourself a better question and saying, am I doing the right thing? Is this revenue generating? Let's say for a salesperson, is this the best use of my time? Let's say it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Monday, having a ritual where maybe your alarm goes off on your cell phone or on your watch, and it's just a timeout to say, hey, it's been 5 hours of work today. What am I going to do between now and the next 4 hours? So again, those rituals become inspection points. That's where you start to see true accountability at the individual level, which obviously impacts the team at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. So with these accountability rituals, what exactly what rituals would you suggest that we incorporate into our lives in order to be accountable?
Yeah, okay. I'd say on an individual level, which obviously impacts everybody around you. If you do this on your own, it's going to impact your marriage. It's going to impact how you show up at work. But one of the things I'm really big on is as soon as you wake up in the morning, you create a ritual, much like when you see the alarm clock go off. A lot of people go grab their phones, start checking emails. They turn on the news, which usually isn't positive in the morning, right? Or they'll read the newspaper, again, with news, probably not positive. So you start creating rituals at the very beginning of the day by asking yourself a set of questions. I say 5 to 10 minutes is all it takes. We talk to ourselves at 1,000 words a minute in our own head. So if you take the first 5 to 10 minutes when you rise in the morning and write down a series of questions. For example, what am I excited about? What am I looking forward to? Who do I get to impact today? What am I grateful for? Who's in my life that's watching right now? Who in my office am I going to be acknowledging today? When you ask a series of questions at the beginning of the day, you start to frame up your own mindset that your day is going to go exactly the way you plan it to do. That's not what most people do. Most people get up, react to kids crying, watch the news. They feed their mind with things not necessarily positive. So we want to do things ritualistically at the beginning of the day. Then you want to do it at the middle of the day. That's why I say at the middle of the day, like lunchtime, have a ritual of, say, 20, 30 minutes to yourself. It could be to read a book. It could be to journal. It could be to call some friends that are not work-related, that you just want to laugh and have fun with. You just want to reconnect. And at the end of the day, same, you have something that you do at night that acknowledges your day, but it gets your mindset ready for the next day. What are you looking forward to for the next day? And you create a plan. So when you do these things, I mean, heck, I teach my clients to do it 3 times a day. Not everybody does it, but if you did it once a day, you're ahead of 99% of society, and you're creating accountability rituals. That's important.
Wow, that's awesome. I've never heard the thing about during lunchtime calling some people and having a good time and a good laugh. I like that. I'm definitely.
It works. I tell you, whenever I'm having a rough day, I just call up a couple buddies of mine. You do a little bit of friendly trash talking and talk about what's going on in life. It just gets your mind off of work. And these are people you've known for a long time to make you feel good. So we don't use our friends enough, even during the middle of the workday, just to get ourselves in the right state of mind.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'd love to hear from you too. Might lighten the load on their day and help them out. One thing when you were talking that I heard, I know we're talking a lot about daily rituals, but I heard you bring up the subconscious. So how do you have success and when sometimes your subconscious mind could pull you back, right? Yeah. And take you out of being accountable. So how do you win?
Well, that's a great question. And that's probably where I spend a lot of my time when I'm trying to recreate new behaviors with people. I'm getting back to their belief systems. Like you said, that equation, beliefs drive behaviors. So you have to do this consciously when you're trying something new. For example, you're trying to create a new behavior in your life. Let's say you want to be a better leader to your team, but you haven't asked the question, well, what can I do to be a better leader? So you consciously write it down, and you have something that reminds you. So it might take you several weeks, usually, consciously, to start to create a new habit. It doesn't happen overnight. We say, change happens in a moment. That's true, but you have to create that ongoing consistency to create that new discipline. So it almost, to recreate it at the subconscious level, you have to consciously do it. It's much like going to the gym. Somebody who likes to work out, you have to consciously make the choice. I'm going to the gym for the next day. So I wrote the goal down. If you go for 10 days straight, you consciously do it, your body starts to react. Say, hey, this is normal. Going to the gym every morning is starting to become a subconscious habit, much like getting up and brushing your teeth. But you have to have that consistently over time.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. And one of the things I was thinking about was in our society today, there's so much lack of accountability, and also people not really taking 100% responsibility for their lives, So my question to you is, you talk about these belief systems. Right. What belief systems do you think contribute to having a positive outlook on accountability and being accountable to everyone around you?
Right. Well, let's hit that first point. You made a really good point about society today in 2014. There's been a lot of sociologists that have made these studies around different generations' beliefs. Gen X, Gen Y, versus how the baby boomers thought, for example. I could look at my grandfather, was a steel worker, came here from Poland, didn't speak a lick of English, never missed a day of work. He doesn't understand calling in sick and making an excuse, back in 1930, 1940s. So he hears stories today, he'd be rolling over his grave, but, we become like this new society of there's this entitlement. So we want to push things off on other people and not take responsibility for things. There's a great study in 1968. Actually, Marvin Scott and Stanford Lyman did a study on what's called accounts, and they talk about excuses and justifications. And this is in 1968. So you think about 2014, this article becomes extremely relevant today because we've become a society where we naturally just want to blame. We obviously are a litigious society. We sue left and right, and that becomes part of our American culture and our legal system. And I like to say, let's take it back to the individual. Let's take responsibility for ourselves. Quit blaming everybody else for your lack of inadequacies or lack of results, the fact of not making money. And I think the more that you do that through these rituals, start to make a positive impact because you're not looking for excuses. You're looking for solutions. You're looking for how to be better, and you're trying to create a better positive attitude. And we all know positive attitude is infectious. When you're around people that have a good mindset, they make excuses, they take responsibility for themselves. Those are the kind of people that we want to hang around. And thus that impacts the people around us. Thus that impacts society.
Yeah, we're hearing about it more and more throughout corporate America and just a lot of different areas, definitely in our culture where accountability has become a serious issue.
Big time.
One of the things that I heard you bring up was excuses. And I'm just curious, when you go into a company and you're working with either the management team or the sales team, how do you handle, excuses, so that person can move on successfully?
Well, I like to create what I call a rule of engagement with a client or a company, and it's a serious thing, but we create a new shift. We call it the no excuse zone. So the no excuse zone says that when I ask you why you get results with your sales team or personal behavior, the natural instinct is to come up with a reason why. That's what we've been asking since we were 2 and 3 years old. Why, right? So we condition ourselves to want to know why. So corporate America is no different. If somebody doesn't get the result and somebody calls them out, holds them accountable, they're going to make an excuse naturally. So if we make a rule, there's no excuses. Take personal responsibility for why it didn't happen. It forces the brain to think differently about their answer. So you have to create a culture. I always say speed of leader dictates speed of pack. So a CEO all the way down has to practice those things too. If the CEO is always making excuses, let's say to Wall Street, because the company's not hitting its numbers, well, guess what? The direct reports are going to do the same. So in a company, you have to take responsibility as a leader and say, we are not going to make excuses. We're going to take personal responsibility for these results because these results came from our own behaviors. And we need to take a self-check about our collective belief system first to make that change. So I'm really big on excuse, kind of barring excuse part of a rule of engagement, not just in a household, but also in the company or leadership team. Heck, even doing it for yourself, it just makes you think different.
That's really a great point. What I was thinking about was also, who do these people go for help with accountability? Like, I know that you are an expert coach and all that, so I was wondering how could we tell people, what to do and where to go for help with accountability?
Right. I mean, coaching is obviously a good thing. It's become quite a sexy term in corporate America, especially in the last decade. It's become more accepted. Especially with popular people like, Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, some of these big names, authors, having coaching programs. So it's not as, shunned upon maybe 20 years ago where you got coaching because something was wrong with you. You get coaching because you're at a level or a peak and you want to make change. So coaching is a natural. I always say married people, your spouse is accountability. Most marriages, I would do a lot of relationship stuff as well. And they don't have communication around certain things in the marriage, talking about a budget, talking about money, talking about their goals. So you can look right there in your own home and get accountability if you just create that communication bridge between the two of you. Same thing with people at work. You work for a sales team or you have a culture within the employees around you, seek somebody out. I always say the more layers of touch points of accountability you have in your life, the higher the probability of success. So if you had a spouse, you had a coach, you had an employee, you had a boss. I mean, heck, you have children. That's a great accountability tool. You let your kids know, hey, daddy's going to go to the gym 5 days this week because he cares about you and he wants to be here for the rest of your life. You know, it's okay for your 14-year-old son to ask you, hey, daddy, I noticed you missed the gym. But see, a lot of people keep their goals and their secrets inside and they don't let it out. That's why I'm a big fan of let everybody know what you're doing, because they're watching you. They're watching if you're trying to quit smoking at your company. So they know that little smoking area at the bottom of the building. They're not going to see you down there if you went publicly accountable and said, hey, I'm going to quit smoking in the next month. So put it out there to the world because you want those layers of accountability if you're serious about the results.
Awesome. Yeah, I like the thing about the quitting smoking, because addiction, I mean, that's a huge issue, you know, and that there's a lot of accountability in that when you make that commitment. I agree. I'm just curious, have you seen any programs or systems to work with people at the individual level to keep them on track on like a daily basis, since this is so important?
You know, I'll tell you, with the advent of technology, I started getting into this now in my own practice, but probably I'd say in the last year, technology like apps on your phone. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but they, say you can't really manage what you can't measure. So they have these apps you can get on your phone for free, where you can check your calorie counts for the day, for example. A lot of people in our culture have struggled with their weight, obese society. If you created accountability that every meal you're going to count what you put in your mouth, it tracks it on a software program, puts it in a nice bar graph, so it lets you know at the end of a day or a week that, hey, 70% of your intake was fat, was protein. So there's a lot of these software programs out there, and it's not just about weight loss. There are programs around goal setting that you can do with these apps, and they're great. They cost you absolutely nothing. But there are ways that you can get yourself to do something on an ongoing basis. Going back to my point of rituals, if you create a ritual every day that you're going to input calorie input, right, where you wear, like technology, they have these fuel bands that you wear on your wrist where you can measure your calories and how many you burn. So how many steps you take. I know Nike's got a program out there. I know there's a Fitbit. These are great opportunities to manage and measure things that you weren't managing and measuring in your life. Same thing with money. They have investment opportunities where you can see where your money's going down to the penny. Most people have never tracked on a monthly basis every single penny they spent. But if they had an application software program, which costs them nothing, to account every penny, they look at their budget a little bit differently. They realize that Starbucks is costing them $4.25 every morning. That adds up over the course of 12 months.
Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah, that's really true. So I know you've worked with Tony Robbins,
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's amazing in of itself. But I was wondering what was it like in regards to accountability working with him?
Well, talking about the no excuse zone, that's where I started learning about it. Because when Tony would ask you, anybody in our company would ask you why you didn't get something done, the natural answer was to come up with an excuse. Well, you trained your mind that that's not an option. So you had to go back and look at your behavior and say, well, the reason why it didn't happen is because I didn't make enough phone calls, I didn't work on my script, and I didn't connect with people in my meetings. Thus, I didn't hit the number. So then he would make you go back and look at your own beliefs and behaviors and say, Mike, you need to really take a look at that. If we're going to do better in the next city or the next cycle or the next event, you got to go back and work on the scripts. I'm glad you didn't make an excuse. Obviously, you didn't hit your number, but it's something of a self-examination process that we built into our company. Again, I wish that companies around Fortune 500 America could bring into their culture, because they talk a lot about accountability, but you bring a guy like me in to really judge whether the accountability is there, it's usually not.
What's the number one problem or issue that you see that holds corporations back within accountability from, beating the competition and increasing their revenues? I mean, if you could say there was one primary.
I think it starts at the top. Great leaders. There's been a lot of writing about leadership styles. The last decade, it's studying leadership leaders themselves, how they believe, how they behave. They not only in corporate America, but in sports. They can take famous coaches like, for example, Coach Walsh, who coached San Francisco 49ers years ago. They talk about how he groomed several dozen future NFL coaches under his tutelage. But he had a very strong belief about empowering people. He wasn't a controlling coach. He wasn't a controlling leader. He wanted to empower his staff. So everybody had their responsibility on the team. He leveraged that and he trusted in that. So they studied that model and figured out, hey, this works in corporate America. If you have a CEO who's grooming the next leader to take over his or her job, rather than trying to protect himself or try to look good, that's empowering people. So everyone's always looking up the ladder, realizing, hey, everybody wants to move up. You don't have a person above you trying to protect their job, trying to the indispensability of themselves. And I call it abundance mentality. When you have a very abundant culture in a company, you're really dedicated to replicating yourself, moving on to another goal, so you can be moving up yourself. And if you're not growing, you're dying. You know that. So it's no different in corporate America. So I always say it starts at the top. And I've worked with many a CEO, many a executive team, get locked in a conference room for a day and go through an offsite retreat. You see very clearly why 800 other employees are not being accountable, because it starts at the top.
Yeah, definitely. Well, sadly, we're going to have to close here.
Okay.
But the thing is, our viewers are really interested in learning about what 3 things could you tell the audience, okay?
Yeah.
In regards to accountability and what they could do, 3 tips.
Okay, number one, you'll get a journal and we'll start writing things down. What's written is real. When you start calling yourself out about your own behaviors, you start being accountable to yourself. So writing stuff down is number one, and tracking, right? Number 2 is create daily rituals. Call yourself out. Say, I'm not doing that. Morning, day, and night. Even if you did it once a day, write down, put it on a note card, put it on your dry erase board in your office, have an alarm clock go off on your cell phone. I mean, that's the beauty of technology. It can remind you constantly just to do something. So creating those rituals on a daily basis, I think that's really important. And the third thing is setting small goals for yourself on a weekly basis. Is not ritualistic. It's actually specific and measurable of some area of your life that you want to work on. If you want to work on, weight loss, for example, or you want to make more money, or you want to be happier in your marriage, or you want to be a better leader, if you don't set it out in advance of a week, you're not going to do it. I always say Monday morning, if you wake up on Monday morning and you fail to plan the night before, you're planning to fail throughout the week. You've got to do these rituals, do it on a weekly basis, write goals down, get a journal, and then lastly, reach out to people around you. I mean, obviously, someone like myself, I have a website, MikeLindstrom.com, but there's several coaches out there in different capacities, whether it's weight loss or psychology and motivation or sales leadership. So find people outside of yourself that you can be accountable to, because the reality is we really don't want to be making excuses if we want to be good leaders. In our hearts. So open up to other people and really reach out to it and let people know, hey, you need some help. It doesn't mean you're struggling or failing. It just means you know that you want to be more accountable to your results at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. I appreciate
you having the time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, again, my name's Carla Justice. We're with the Accountability Thing.
And I'm Briar Mealis.
And if you'd like to learn more about accountability and how we can help, you can visit us online at theaccountabilitything.com. And we're also available on Facebook. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.